Well, it's no secret that Chris Froome has made some contentious comments about disc brakes. And he's done this in a couple of his videos. And when you go down in the comments, people have got all of these excuses about Chris Froome, the way he's using his bike. It could be he's got a bung frame. It could be, he's got something wrong in his bike and he should change it all out. And it's not the disc brakes, it's just a one-off. Or his pro mechanic knows what he's doing, or those pro mechanics haven't got enough time to spend on the bikes because they're time constrained because they've got all these bikes to look after. All these excuses, right? That there's nothing wrong with disc brakes and it's just either Chris Froome or it's his mechanic. Don't know what they're doing. Well, anyway, in response to that, Chris Froome's mechanic, Gary Blim, came out and responded to the audience. And it was quite interesting listening to Gary because he's got a nice, strong South African accent. And I know a few South Africans here in Perth, West Australia, because a lot of South Africans come across to Perth and they have this saying that goes, pack for Perth. So they all come over here and they start a new life in Australia. And you get to hear this accent it's quite common here. So it was nice to hear Gary and his nice, strong, thick South African accent. So let's roll that intro and let's have a listen to what Gary has to say. And then we can have a bit of a discussion about why he made those comments and why disc brakes really work quite well on mountain bikes, but that when they transitioned them to road bikes, there's some lacking there. There's some lacking in the technology and the way it works on road bikes.
I'm not a huge fan of disc brakes. The whole theory for road cycling and disc brakes is that you can brake last minute. And yes, the peloton's doing that. But sometimes the tires are not adequate enough to go in so hard into the corner, and you're seeing a lot of crashes in the peloton. Most definitely the speeds of racing has gone up a hell of a lot as well. Workload with disc brakes is insane. You can get a brake to work absolutely perfect for a normal cyclotourist. But for a professional that will hit a 20 to 30 kilometer descent, who's really heavy on his brakes, by the bottom, the rotor is noisy, the pistons are frozen, they're stuck. Hopefully with the new 12 speed from Shimano, I think hopefully those problems have been resolved. But I don't know, Chris is not a huge fan. There's a noise factor, it's not super reliable. Wheel change is way slower. So I think those are aspects that can improve. In mountain biking, racing is different. I know they've been using it for years, but racing is completely different in mountain biking. It's not the same type of elements that these guys would face daily. The biggest thing is the weight factor, because now you add additional 300, 400 grams to the bike. So where are you going to lose that weight? Ultimately, you need to lose it on the frame or on the wheels. That's it. So which means you need to go super light. Once again, pushing the boundaries there. I think it was more forced by the manufacturers than anything else, and not so much by the riders. This was coming from the manufacturers at the end of the day. I remember 12 years ago, I think they spoke to me about disc brakes are coming to the peloton, and what do you think we could do to improve it, or what could be the issues on the roadside? Like I explained to them back then, I said, if you can have an adjustable piston, already you solve some of the issues, because if that piston gets blocked and is hard, you should be able to move it enough so that you've got some clearance. But I mean, yeah, it's easy to say it, but to do it is a different story.
Well, Gary made some really good points. And one thing I want to really make clear with people is that these pro mechanics who are working on these teams, these are a business. They're multi-million-dollar teams, and they need to have the best. They need to have their bikes in a condition where the rider is going to get from A to B and the rider can perform at 100% or greater if possible, and that bike's not going to let the rider down. So they need the best mechanics that they can find and get their hands on. And this is what people need to realize. These guys are experts in their field. Now, when you listen to the interview that I just played with Gary, he tells you how he worked his way up and he was headhunted, and Chris Froome handpicked him when he was at his peak of riding. So Chris Froome could have had anyone because he was at the top of his game at the time, and he picked Gary. So Gary knows what he's doing. He's an expert in his field, and these guys have been working on disc brakes for many, many years now. So you can't really challenge the guy. Like, he knows more than all of us put together when it comes to putting bikes together. So let's get into why he made those comments, because we need to really take those on board, because he knows a hell of a lot more about installing and building a bike and putting disc brakes on it than I do. But why is it that they're having so much trouble at this pro level? Well, I think there's four main reasons why when they transitioned the disc brake to the road bike from the mountain bike, there's certain things that they didn't consider, manufacturers didn't consider. And a lot of people have this view. They think, oh, we have disc brakes on cars, we have disc brakes on motorbikes, we have disc brakes on mountain bikes, and they put them on road bikes. And you roadies, you're just living in the past and you're just complaining. And please, let's stop hearing that record, rim brakes, rim brakes. Like, let's live in today. Disc brakes are here to stay. Stop whining about disc brakes. Well, the reality is disc brakes are not perfected. If you want to go out and buy a disc brake bike, that's fine, right? But this is what Gary's saying, they're not perfected. And the reason why is there's four main reasons for that. Now, the first thing I would say is that why disc brakes are really a great idea on mountain bikes is because if you were still using cantilever or some sort of caliper brake on a mountain bike, you got a lot of dirt on the rim. So you're going to have ineffectiveness because of contamination. So moving the brake from the rim to the center, to the hub, to a disc brake is always going to be a better idea, even in fairly dry conditions, because even if you've got a bit of moisture in the dirt, it's going to be a problem. Whilst on a road bike, it's only when it's actually really raining and you're getting road muck off the road that then the rim brake is affected. So that's the first thing. So having a disc brake on a mountain bike is going to give you better performance more of the time, just because of you're moving the brake surface from the rim to the hub. Now, the second reason, and a lot of people kind of challenge this, but this is the reality. When you have a mountain bike and you're riding on a surface that's not tarmac, so you're riding on dirt or you're riding on some sort of surface that is loose, or it can break, or it's dirt, or it's stones, or it could even just be a road with contamination on it. The grip of that tire, or the adhesion between the surface and the tire, is less. So what happens on a road bike is when you get to a point where that wheel has been braked so significantly that it stops turning, the wheel doesn't slide, the bike rotates around the front wheel, right? So on a mountain bike, but when you get to that point, the wheel tends to slide because the surface is soft and you build the dirt up in front of the wheel. It's the same with a four-wheel drive. You have less traction off-road. You don't have more. And people can talk about making the tyres wide. The reason why you make the tyres wider is because your weight per square inch is less. So you have less pressure at any one point on the dirt. So the wider you get, the more you spread it out. And when you make the tyre softer, it also spreads it out more. And that's the same with a four-wheel drive system of a car, and same with a push bike, a mountain bike. So that's the second thing. You can't ultimately apply as much braking force because the tyre traction, the brake of adhesion, is less when it locks up. Well, the third reason is the disc size. Now, when you look at a mountain bike, generally they have the same or a bigger disc on the bike. So when you're braking, you've also got more leverage, and you don't need as much force because it's a bigger disc, more leverage. You don't need as much force, which doesn't generate as much heat. And also the disc is bigger to dissipate that heat. So you don't have the disc getting as hot as you would on a road bike if you were applying the same sort of braking force or energy you're trying to get away from the bike, because there's a bigger disc, it can dissipate the heat better, you get less fade. And this is the same reason on a car. If you go and buy a performance car, instead of the standard model, you get the R or the Sports or whatever, you get these like Brembo brakes or whatever, and generally they're bigger. or they've got holes in them, or they're dual-sized bigger brakes because they can dissipate the heat better and you get less fade. It's the same with a bike. So that is the third reason why you haven't got as much problem with overheating, because the disc brakes are just bigger on a mountain bike and they don't have to work as hard. Then we have the fourth point. Now the fourth point is where they mount the caliper. Now when we look at a mountain bike has a active suspension system, so it has a rigid metallic or a device where the spring and oil is inserted into, and that's designed to not flex, and that's on purpose. You don't want it to flex. You want the spring and the oil to take up all of the travel that's related to suspension. You want the other parts to be rigid. You don't want them flexing as well, because it's like having on a car, the arms where the shock absorber and the spring are on are flexing, so that then the suspension doesn't work correctly. It's the same principle. So when they bolt the caliper onto that fork housing, it's bolted to a solid piece of material that doesn't flex. So when it's in line with the disc, it's going to stay in line with the disc. It's not going to flex or move. But when you move to a road bike where we're using a frame which actually is designed to have flex like this in it, and if you get your bike and you get your end of your forks, you can go like this and you can actually move them, and you can actually take them out of alignment and they will flex. So the forks are designed to flex and take up those road deflections when you go over bumps. Is built into the forks. It's passive suspension. So what you're actually doing is you're bolting a caliper to a fork that is designed to move and flex. So of course it only needs to move a little bit, and it's going to set the adjustment out. Now we all can say, yeah, it's got a few axle to brace it and all this, but the distance between the pads and the disc are very small. Plus we've also got heat expansion and all these other factors that also roll into that. And this is why they're not going back. So once you've set them up, as Gary explains, and then you go for a ride and you hammer down a hill and you brake hard and they get really hot, especially because they're using a smaller disc, and also because they can brake harder because they've got better traction on the road. They're not riding off-road, so they can pull the bike up quicker. They're trying to put more heat for a smaller disc. It gets really hot, and that starts to make everything expand and deform. So when it goes back and cools down, it doesn't go back to the same position. And this is the problem. Then it starts ting, 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 tinging. Now, Gary's suggestion was that you can manually adjust that alignment, or somehow it realigns, or there's two separate pistons, not a self-adjusting pistons, and then you wouldn't get any rub. But he's saying that, hey, look, even with cars, even if you take your tyre off your car and you get your disc and go turn it, you can feel it rubbing. So disc brakes tend to have that issue constantly, unless you want to build a very complicated and expensive disc. And then obviously on a push bike it gets very, very heavy, and we're already making the bikes heavier with disc brakes and electric gears. So this is what Gary's trying to say in this video. So it's very, very interesting, guys. So what do you think? What do you think about Gary and his comments, and Chris Froome having a little bit of a dig at disc brakes? Leave your comments down below. And also, guys, if you like this sort of content, this technical content about push bikes, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell below so you get all of my content and see all of my videos. And remember to smash that like button. And I will see you next vid, guys. Take care.